Welcome to AskSMEAnything. Your chance to ask the IT Pro TV subject matter experts questions live. Here's your host, Ronnie Wong.
Welcome to another episode of Asks Me Anything. This is your opportunity, of course, to interact with the subject matter experts right here on IT Pro TV. And if you want to do so, especially by asking a question, just go ahead on Twitter and tweet with the hashtag AskSMeAnything. And that, of course, will get you in line and put the questions in front of us so that we can try and answer them. Of course, we get a lot of different questions, so you'll just be put into a queue and we'll be able to do that. Now, today we have with us Joe Peacock. I was trying to remember your name, Joe. Joe Peacock, our project management, process management, policy management. We'll just call her the expert, is what we'll actually call her. The IT expert herself, Miss Joe Peacock. Joe, welcome to our show. How are you doing today?
Absolutely great, Ronnie. I'm just very, very disappointed that you can't even remember my name, given that we sit opposite each other every single day of the week.
I know. It's because, I hate to say it, I fell back into kind of a routine where I was trying to think of another adjective that I could add into the front when I normally get to host with you. That's one of the games I get to do as well. And today I get to host with you on Asks Me Anything.
I know, it's great,
It is our chance and our viewers' chance, of course, to be able to ask these different questions that they have and to see what they can actually learn from you directly. All right, so Joe, right now, what we have, of course, is a line of questions that are starting to populate up here. So let's get to our very first question that we have as we get started, okay? So we have from our Twitter feed here, actually from email, okay, is what we have here. It says, I would like to understand more about the latest trends in service management. Can you actually suggest some different ones that are out there? All right, Joe, so here it is. I guess they're trying to say that they might not be sure about what the latest trends are. So what is a place that someone that is trying to learn about this, where would you tell them to start as far as latest trends go?
Well, I think, and I'm just sort of surmising here, but I'm guessing that the question probably came from somebody who, and this is quite a lot of the discussion that I hear as well out in the big wide world here, is that, ITIL's been around for quite a number of years now as a service management framework. It came from, obviously, the UK government, and it's been around since the mid-1980s, so it's been around for quite some time. I know that it's on 2011 iteration, which is just an update to version 3, and we're currently working on 2018 update as well. But nevertheless, it's kind of seen as being around for a while, and people are asking about what new and exciting ideas and new and exciting governance frameworks there are out there to do with service management. And I think really that's where that question's come from, is more along the lines of, well, what is there that's new and exciting out there? Has it trended yet? Well, I'll let you make your mind up about that. But I want to talk to you about a couple of different frameworks for service management. One of them being the SIAM framework. And another one we're going to just take a brief look at is Verisma or VeriSM. It depends on how you want to pronounce it. I've heard various different ways. I've heard one from the author of Verisma, and I've heard another one from the examining board. So I don't think anybody really minds as long as you understand exactly what it is. But the first one I want to take a look at is SIAM. Now, SIAM is a framework for managing IT services or governing IT services. It's still a framework, exactly the same as ITIL, but whereas ITIL will look at the service provider environment and treats that service provider environment as a single entity for the most part, where we have suppliers, most certainly, but those suppliers are managed by supplier management, by a contract management role. And those suppliers are treated as sort of they are a third party, but they're treated as sort of, an additional layer in that service management framework. SIAM looks at things slightly differently because SIAM looks at the possibility and, well, actually, I'm just thinking about this now, and when we think about this we tend to think of Microsoft as being a good example of a SIAM framework, because Microsoft has now started to bring us software as a service. I know that that's been around for quite some time, but to be perfectly honest, it's only got into the live sort of, the business environment within the last, I'd say, about 2 years. I mean, I don't know what you would agree with that.
Yeah, sure.
When we talk about Office 365, and Office 365 is working as, it's treating Microsoft as software as a service. And if we think about our common workplace now, we've gone from an environment where, for the most part, organizations have bought software. We might have had Microsoft manage it for us, but essentially we've bought licenses and we've bought software. We've bought the operating system by buying our licenses. We've bought the actual applications themselves, such as Microsoft Office. And again, we've done it by purchasing licenses, but nevertheless, we've bought it. Now, though, and I think, I'm not too sure who it was that started this, it's probably Adobe, but now we're in the world where we no longer buy licenses. What we buy is a subscription. And so we end up with multiple service providers, because what we're doing is we're buying subscriptions and we're actually buying software as a service. So we no longer have to worry about the development. We no longer have to worry about enhancements. We no longer have to concern ourselves with changes. Now, that's not to say that we don't have to manage change in our environment, because we do. However, if I'm looking at trends at the moment, what I'm seeing is, certainly within the last 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, there's been a very distinct move from having software internally within an organization to having our services provided externally by service providers. And so SIAM looks at that particular model, should we say. And sometimes I think I struggle to find the right words, because I'm trying to find a word that actually meets everybody's needs and meets everybody's requirements, because it's a word that, we've got to consider sort of globally as well. We all have different meanings to different words, as Ronnie knows. Worked with me far too often. So SIAM looks at the model of having multiple service providers and not just one service provider. So we have what we call an integrator layer within the SIAM framework, and that integrator is actually a coordination layer. It's a layer that will coordinate all of those service providers. So be they internal service providers, which you can have obviously for your in-house written software, or external service providers. So the service integrator layer is more of a coordinator than an actual support and development function itself. So that's SIAM. And SIAM, as I say, is very, very relevant for our modern environment that we've sort of evolved in the last 2.5 years. And then we've also got Verisma. Now, I'm really excited about Verisma. And by the way, while I'm talking about SIAM, we do actually have in our course library the SIAM Foundation certification. It's a fully accredited course. You are able, along with a lot of our other governance courses, you are able to take the XIN exam at the end of the course once you've completed it. So by all means, check it out in our course library. That's something that may be of interest to you. So let's get on to Verisma, or VeriSM, however you want to describe that. Now, Verisma is again another accreditation, another framework that is accredited by XIN as an examining body. And again, we don't have, I've got to say, that as of now, as of June 2018, we do not have this particular course in our library right now. However, it's on my to-do list.
Right.
I can't give you an exact
short to-do list.
My short to-do list. I think we've got about 35 requests in there so far, but it is on my to-do list. It's on my radar, and it's one I want to get out there as soon as possible, because I'm really excited about Verisma. I mean, I'm excited about SIAM as well, don't get me wrong. I don't know how that really makes me maybe a sad person to be excited about governance models, but nevertheless, I'm excited about Verisma, because what Verisma does is it expands service management. For years now, and I've been involved with ITIL for a number of years. And throughout all of these years, people have said to me, surely we can take these policies and we can take these principles and we can apply them outside of IT. And you know what? We can. If I think about concepts like incident management, for instance. Now, incident management is about restoring normal service operation, but it's also about customer service and good customer service skills. And surely we can apply the principle and the differentiation between incident and problem management. We can apply that to everything. It doesn't matter what it is that we want to achieve in a customer service environment. We can differentiate between, well, do I just want a quick win? Do I just want to get something working right now? Do I want something that serves my immediate need? Or do I want to get to a root cause of an issue? Do I really want to find out exactly what has happened in the past? And we can apply that to absolutely everything. And that's what Verisma does, is it takes the concept of service management and it says, well, look, let's expand this into our business environment. And instead of just keeping service management as exclusively an IT thing and keeping it our little secret, let's expand this into the business world and let's apply these common sense principles to the business environment. And that's exactly what it does. As I say, it gets me quite excited when I think about this, because for years now, people have been asking me these questions about applying ITIL principles and service management principles outside of IT. And for years, I've been saying, yes, of course you can. It's just really common sense. And I've always said this, service management is common sense written down. And that's exactly what Verisma is. It's taking that common sense and saying, well, yeah, you can apply it to anything. So in terms of common trends, and I think to just tie back to that question, in terms of common trends, I would definitely highlight SIAM as a trend which deals with our latest environment, as it were, our latest environment model with multiple service providers. And Verisma then just takes the service provider model and the common sense aspects of that and applies it into all walks of life and into all organizations. And both of those, I'd say, are common trends. But both of those, I think, I don't like to use the word trend too much, because the word trend refers to something that's sort of here for 5 minutes and then gone. And so I think that both of these make sense. And I think that both of these are required. And in terms of trend, I don't think they're a trend. I think they're here to stay. And I'd certainly like to see them as here to stay. Now, are they going to replace ITIL? No, they're not, because they are different models. They are different frameworks. But nevertheless, they all mesh together. And I think they work really well.
Now, Jo, with your experience, so this is a follow-up question to what we're talking about here. With your experience in terms of ITIL and SIAM and now Verisma SM, when you start to take a look at it, is there really that much of a differentiation between that, since we're in that subscriber model versus the traditional IT service that you're seeing? Is it really that much of a disparity that you're seeing there, or do you see kind of just the idea of ITIL developing into what we're seeing now in SIAM and this idea of Verisma SM?
Is there that much of a differentiator? It really depends. I guess that's and I know that's a terrible way to answer the question, but it really depends, because a lot of organizations want to retain their skills and their expertise in-house, and we do have a lot of organizations out there in the big wide world that do not like the idea of service, software as a service, and they don't like the idea of subscription-based software. They would rather control in-house, and they feel as though potentially control is lost when we move out to this subscription-based model. So I don't think that SIAM is ever going to replace ITIL as a framework.
Right.
However, they can sit side by side very well, and they are both still very relevant depending on the environment that we have within specific organizations. I mean, let's think about security, for instance. Let's think about our government departments and our government organizations. In our government department, security is such an issue that software as a service doesn't really fit too well there, because whilst we can implement certain elements of software as a service, we've got to be very, very careful, because any link, any direct network connection between a supplier and a server that's sitting in a government building somewhere, well, that's an exposure in terms of security. So while software as a service is a great idea and it allows flexibility to users like you and me, it doesn't actually allow, say, government departments and highly secure environments, it doesn't allow them or doesn't give them the control of their services. What we're actually seeing is that our suppliers like Microsoft will take over that control, and that's really convenient for us, but it's not so convenient for highly secure organizations and environments. So there's always going to be a need for both. Are we actually moving from a single service provider to multiple service providers? Yes, we are. Certainly as a sort of, as a world, really, in general, we are moving to that model. But then that doesn't mean that the single service provider approach is ever going to be removed, because it's not.
All right, Jo. Well, thank you again for helping us to answer that question, as we've gotten it in from our Twitter feed as well. And when we start to think about it, right, for those that want to submit questions, make sure you hashtag AskSMEAnything on your Twitter, and that will allow us to see those questions too. Now, Jo, as you were talking about this idea, somebody else has posted another question for us, and so we are ready for question number 2 as we take a look here. I am looking for a career in IT. What certification should I go for first? All right, Jo, this is pretty broad in the concept, so we're going to let you tackle this here, and I may jump in if I disagree. I'm joking. We'll talk about this a little bit more, is what will happen.
Well, I think okay, let's add some context
Sure.
to this question then, shall we? That's probably the first thing that we want to do, because it really depends on where this person's coming from. Now, I don't know how technical this person is.
Right.
If they are just out of school, and maybe they've just come out of college, and maybe they have no technical experience, then I would certainly say, and yes, I know that you're going to, well, not necessarily disagree, but I think that we need to have some collaboration here, all right, Ronnie? Because I would definitely say that they need to have an understanding of the basics of IT, but I would also tell you that from a governance perspective, everybody needs to have an ITIL foundation. And I know that, people will say to me, oh, but, that's maybe the technical stuff should come first. I know that Ronnie's going to tell me that the technical stuff should come first. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter what job that you're going for now in an IT environment. And a lot of breaks into organizations are through the service desk or the help desk, if you want to call them that. It doesn't matter what job you go for in IT. If you're going as a junior member of staff, you're going as somebody who's looking to train. Even as a junior member of staff, you'll find that organizations are now looking for an ITIL Foundation certificate on your CV or resume. They want to see that. It's on part of the job description for any role that they're posting. And the reason for that is simply because it gives you an idea of the structure of an IT team. You see, I always say, and this is somebody, speaking as somebody who got my sort of, MCSE and Unix admin years ago, I always say that technical skills are very, very easy to pick up and to learn. And the thing is that in every single environment, we have got a very specific range of technical skills in any environment. And so whilst you can study for your qualifications, and let's say, you've obtained your MCSE or MCSA, and you can go into an environment with that technical skill, nevertheless, the configuration of that particular team or of that particular environment, the technical environment, is always going to be unique to that particular environment. And even though there are a lot of sort of commonalities, nevertheless, there's still an element of uniqueness within every environment. Now, one of the things about ITIL as a framework for managing services is that ITIL gives you a distinct set of processes that need to be in place in order for your services to work efficiently and effectively and deliver value. And the reason why organizations want that ITIL foundation on your CV or resume is simply because it already gives you a heads up as it were, when you walk into the organization on how the organization is structured within IT. Because if you understand, and I mentioned again about incident and problem management, if you understand what incident management is and what incident management should do, and the fact that the service desk does incident management and that the service desk manager does sort of X, Y, and Z in terms of activities, then that means that if you were to come in, even as the most junior member of staff, if you were to walk into the service desk, you would automatically know what that service desk should be doing. And so that's the reason why most organizations now will be asking for that qualification, because then you'll know that if something's not working, you know who to go to. You'll automatically say, right, well, I need to speak to the person who is doing problem management, for instance. You'll automatically know where to go. So it gives you a heads up on structure. Now, I know that you're going to tell me that you disagree and you think that the technical qualifications are important. And yes, they are. However, if you're starting off, there's a reason why that is there as a requirement on most job descriptions nowadays.
Yeah, no, Joe, I agree with you. It really, at least from my perspective, it depends on a perspective of what job you're going for at the beginning. So if you're not really going in to support the system as a technical support person, then I don't see the idea of you saying, hey, I'm going to learn all this. Now, just when I say that, right, it doesn't mean that you don't have to learn any of that, but I'm saying that I wouldn't make that my main focus. If my focus is to now become the actual service manager or the actual IT administrator, I would probably focus more in on those skills that will help me to develop in that way. So there's not always this process where you start at the bottom and always work on
Right.
through, because it may be that somebody did kind of tell you that you need to do that. But just when we say that, there is that division where you have that technical side of operations, then you have the management side of operations, and yeah, they have to go together at some point.
Well,
so I think that there is that focus.
I did want to mention about the other thing that the ITIL Foundation will give you, and of course that's in our course library as well. But the other thing that ITIL Foundation will give you is a common language, and that's really important. And it's not just a common language with you and your suppliers or with you and your customers, but it's a common language then across IT. I mean, you and I know, Ronnie, we've joked about this and
Right.
laughed about it, but we speak different languages.
Correct.
And so having a common understanding of a language is really important. Otherwise, we're not going to be efficient in our work. And if I'm talking to you about one thing and you having a completely different understanding to what it is that I actually meant, then that doesn't give us an effective communication either. And it means that, we spend a lot of time trying to get to a resolution that perhaps if we'd both been speaking the same language, we would have got to a lot quicker. So that ITIL Foundation, it really will. If you were to spend the time in a classroom, it would be 2.5 days of your time. And it's definitely worth it because it does give you that common language. But then, I mean, take a look at our course library. And to be perfectly honest, you can pick and choose what modules you want to listen to and when you want to listen to them and watch them. It really is at your convenience. And it's definitely worth it for that step in the door, as it were.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Joe, on the idea of ITIL Foundation. If your company is requiring it, it's on the job application as one of the qualifications. It is essential because it means that shop is trying to establish that standardization of what they want to make sure that you understand and and so that is a good one to begin with to learn. The technical skills, they can come, even after that. But having that solid knowledge that you need at the beginning of how that shop is going to operate and what rules you have to operate is different. Because in the environment that I came up through, Joe, it was just, all right, here's what I'm doing. You watch or you go and do that, and then you'll get your chance to do it whenever there's an opportunity for you to be able to jump in there and do this. So it was almost a way of just like, all right, I just need to pay attention as much as I can to get that. But at least with this, when you have this, you kind of understand here's the structure of what this company is going to expect and what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, which I think really does set that framework, that focus in mind that we need to. So I don't disagree that this may be the first one, unless you're only doing like computer repair, and that's the only thing that you're actually set up to do. I
Well,
probably wouldn't do that.
no, and again, I'm going to disagree because
Sure.
you've just said something. You've just said something to me
Right.
that, or to everybody actually,
Mhm.
you just said something there that I didn't understand
Okay.
because of language differences.
Right.
And I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Okay.
And that is the word. You used the word shop.
Yep.
A shop to me is something where, well, you go in and buy something.
Mhm.
That's a shop.
Right.
Whereas here in the US, of course, we use the word shop as an abbreviation for workshop.
Right.
Right. So there's a completely different language there. And if you were to say to me, oh, I need you to go into the shop, then I would say, okay, then well, can I have some money?
Mm-hmm.
And as I used to say to my dad when I was a kid, can I spend the change as well, right? But, so there is a need. There is a definite need for a common language. And that's just a sort of a perfect example of that. There really is that need. And that's one of the things that the foundation will give you. But even if you're just doing computer repair, you still need to have an understanding of how to fix a problem and how to do basic customer service.
Yeah, and Joe, like I said, I do agree with that aspect of things that you're talking about. Most of the workshops that you go to today or that you end up working in, they hand you a checklist is what they do, and then you walk
Yeah.
through and you essentially follow that pattern for you. So it's not saying that the skills or that the knowledge is not necessary, but they make it a little bit easier than what we were, which was, here it is, it's not working, figure it out.
Yeah.
Here's a printer that's not working, it's on the network, 10 people are waiting, it needs to be done as quickly as you can. And it wasn't that they were like, here's a guide for you to follow and troubleshoot. It was just, you do it, and that's the way it is. And either way, right, I learned how to do it, but at the same time, it was probably a lot slower process than if we already had things that were set up to help
Well,
us to develop that
I
through.
remember being given manuals
Yeah.
that were kind of that thick, and you were asked to sort of read through them in order to fix the printer problem.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you know what? They got lost most of the time, or they were thumbed through so often that you couldn't read them anyway. They were fairly illegible, so you had to figure it out for yourself.
Oh, no doubt. All right, Joe. Well, thank you again for helping us out there, even though we disagreed a little bit, or just on the fringe, just not very much, but just on the fringe here. Thank you for answering that. And don't forget, do check out our library right there for the ITIL Foundations. That will help you to get started in what Joe was also talking about as well. But there is another question, and don't forget, if you want to submit that question, you go ahead and hashtag AskSMEAnything. So our next question, Joe, here, as we have it up on our screen, do you have any advice on which project management methodology is the best? Now, Joe, this is quite the gamut of a question because there are so many different project management methodologies, but I'm assuming since they're asking for your advice, this is more your opinion. So, Joe, you get to express your opinion without me disagreeing with it. Is what happens here. All right. So, Joe, what is this about? Okay.
Well, I look at this and how do I help Elena out other than saying, well, it really depends, to be perfectly honest. Which project methodology is the best? I don't think there's a best, but there is a best for a particular environment. And I think you've got two different approaches to project management. Now, without going into individual sort of methodologies, we've got two approaches. We've either got the waterfall approach or we've got an agile-based approach. Now, a waterfall approach is it's seen by some as a traditional approach to project management, and this is where a project is kicked off, as it were, a project is initiated, and then the product is delivered right at the very end of the project. Now, I say this is quite traditional because in IT, sort of, 20 years ago, there would be a time when, we'd get the budget, we'd have a new idea, we'd have a project that was initiated, and then we'd probably see the end result in about a year or 18 months' time, by which time you'd forgotten about it, right? Yeah. So that would be a traditional waterfall approach. I don't mean the forgetting about it bit, all right? That wasn't very traditional, but yeah, that would be the waterfall approach. And then we've got the agile approach, and the agile approach releases projects or releases software and products incrementally. So we release a bit at a time. It really depends on what it is you're doing. And if you are, let's just say that your project is to, I don't know, I've been laughing with Zach on this one because Zach's got this great idea about building a roller coaster. Okay, so that's a project that Zach and I are working on. Whether we actually ever get to build a roller coaster or not is another matter. But an agile approach, for instance, if you're building a roller coaster, would not work. Because you cannot release parts of a roller coaster at a time. So we'd have to use a traditional waterfall approach in order to release that project. Yeah, we initiate the project, we ensure that we've got budget, we ensure that we have the justification, in other words, that we're going to get a financial return on that roller coaster, and then we have the life of that project where we coordinate all of the resources that are required, and we map out all of the activities, and sure, all of the activities happen in sort of a chronological order, and they have to happen as per the date and time specified and coming on budget, etc. But ultimately, the roller coaster is not released to the public, and nobody can get on the roller coaster until the project has been finalized, or at least until that early life support and that beta testing. Okay, we can't do that incrementally. It would just end up in a lot of hospital bills. That's all that would happen. So then there's the agile approach. And the agile approach is the approach, let's think about when you are, I don't know, you have a mobile phone, you have a cell phone, don't you, Ronnie? Yeah. We won't talk about TVs because we all, well, I know about Ronnie's TV. Yeah, Ronnie's still got a very old traditional TV.
I do.
So we'll talk about cell phones. How often is the software on your cell phone updated?
Right now I don't really. I'm going to say every 2 to 3 months, maybe every year or so. I don't have a clue.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, it depends on what phone you've got, I guess. I know that on my cell phone, the software is probably updated at least once a month.
Wow, that's
and
nice.
That's an agile approach. That's an agile approach to development. And what we're doing there is we're releasing by increments.
Right.
So we're developing incrementally. Now, we're developing using sprints or iterations, depending on the terminology that you want to use. And we are actually sort of, we'll keep, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 iterations, 2 or 3 sprints before we release. We won't release in every single sprint, but nevertheless, we're going to release incrementally. So with this particular product, then there is an agreement that they will perform a release every single month. And so at the end of every single month, things will have definitely been tested. It's not prior to testing, but at the end of every single month, we release whatever iterations are ready to be released at the end of that month. And that's released in an agile way. So what you're doing is you are developing and you are deploying in an iterative way. So we would call that continual or continuous. I've seen sometimes continual implementation. So we don't tend to lose interest with continual implementation. Well, I'd hope that we ensure that we maintain interest. With a continual implementation, what we're doing is we're building on the momentum that we should have generated at the start of the project, and we keep that momentum going, and we deliver value on a regular basis. We're not just waiting until the project finishes and then we deliver value. So for some projects, the waterfall approach is best. If you're building a roller coaster, it's definitely best. But if you are, updating and creating updates for a cell phone, then the agile approach is definitely the best. So is there a best methodology? No, you will follow whichever methodology your organization wants to follow. What I will tell you is that you need to have a consistent methodology. There has to be consistency across your organization. You can't have one team following one methodology and another team following another methodology. However, in terms of approach, then, well, one of the approaches could be waterfall and another approach could be agile. It depends on what it is that you're actually releasing and what you're planning on delivering at the end. As I say, you cannot deliver a roller coaster incrementally.
All right. So, Jo, when we start talking about that, because those are all interesting concepts that you talked about here, if we were to take a look at that idea of let's say like a waterfall approach overall. What are some of the methodologies that lend itself to that? Is that something like the PMP that we're talking about, or does that one actually matter at all?
Right. Well, a PMP is a certificate. It's not a
Hmm. Okay.
methodology. So a PMP is a certification that is based on the PM book, the Project Management Book of Body of Knowledge, which is a book, a very large book. It's not actually a methodology. It's a principle for project management. Methodologies include things like Prince 2, for instance, which
Okay.
is a methodology is more prescriptive. It's
Right.
actually telling you how to do something. Whereas the PMI, Project Management Institute, PM BOK, will not tell you how to do something. It will tell you what you need in order to be able to deliver a successful project. So a lot of organizations will insist that their project managers have the PMP certification. That's the Project Management Professional certification. And what it means is that project manager understands that what they need to do in their environment is to create a methodology that's going to work within that environment. Now, previously I used that word consistency. Ultimately, as far as PMI is concerned, the Project Management Institute, they're not going to be sort of, prescriptive. I was going to say dictatorial, but I use the word prescriptive in exactly what methodology you use. What they'll tell you is that these are the elements that you need to have, and it's up to you to tailor a methodology for use and for relevance in your organization. So whilst a lot of organizations, say within the US, will use that PM BOK as a guide, what they should be doing is tailoring that body of knowledge to their organization and producing a methodology that is tailored to their organization. So this is how we manage projects within this organization. And they can either use waterfall approaches or they can use agile based approaches. That's completely up to the project manager or the PMO, the project management office, to decide on what project management looks like in that organization. Now, we do have other methodologies that, whilst PMI is not, or the PM BOK is not a methodology per se, there are more prescriptive methodologies. We do have Prince 2, and we also have Agile. And again, though, I would never consider them to be specific methodologies. They're not particularly prescriptive. They are a guidance. And whilst we do have these particular guidances in our course materials, in our course library, again, I'd always issue caution with these and just say these are not designed. Not one of our courses for project management are designed as a prescriptive, this is how you do project management. This is just a guidance that simply says this is what you need to include when you're managing a project, but how you do it specifically, that's down to your organization.
All right, Jo. Well, thank you again for helping us and for pointing us the right direction inside of our course library as well. That will help you to learn more about these methodologies that Jo talked about too. Now, Jo, that brings us up to our last question, and we are running out of time. So let's take a look at this. Give us enough time to actually be able to do this. All right. What is the difference between a business relationship manager and a business analyst? All right, Jo. So here it is, two different positions here. Besides the name, what is the difference here?
Well, you know what? These are two roles that are quite often confused. And so I'm not surprised that somebody at some point in time is going to ask that particular question because they are often confused. So let's look at this I'm going to look at this from both a service management perspective and also a project management perspective, because obviously, governance, I guess, is my arena, so to speak. So a business relationship manager is responsible for the relationship with the organization. So they're responsible for the relationship between IT and the organization. So what they are doing is they are building confidence in the general organization with IT. They are building that, I don't want to keep using the word relationship, but they are building trust with the IT and with the partners within the organization. So a business relationship manager's role really is to build that confidence and trust. a business relationship manager should be sitting in with the organization, and they should be identifying areas where IT can add value to the organization. So a business relationship manager is kind of, the person that's sitting next to you, looking over your shoulder saying, yeah, that laptop doesn't seem to be working too well for you. How about we do something a little bit more portable? Would that work for you? That's the role of a business relationship manager, is to really to be there looking over your shoulder and to be managing that relationship. They also act as an escalation point for the organization should there be any issues with maybe major incidents, for instance, or maybe changes that haven't, or requests that haven't gone through as quickly as the users would like, then the business relationship manager will be acting as an escalation point. They'll also act as a mediator. Now, I like the use of that word, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be fights between IT and the business. But, sometimes, let's be realistic, there are disagreements. Sometimes IT will say, well, look, we did all of this for you. Aren't you happy? And the business is saying, yeah, but what about that outage that we had last night? So a business relationship manager should be acting as a mediator. So that's the BRM. But the business analyst is something completely different, because a business analyst works within a project. And the business analyst's role is simply to analyze the organization. It's to analyze, in terms of a project, how much value that particular project will add to the organization. So whether that new initiative that we're bringing in is going to achieve a return on investment, how quickly is it going to achieve a return on investment? So the business analyst is focused on the value returns. Now, those value returns could be financial returns as well, but they are there to analyze performance of the organization or that particular business unit, and they will then feed back to the project exactly what is expected in terms of return for any new initiative. So I like to think of the BRM as more of the cuddly type. The BRM are supposed to be holding hands and saying,
Wow.
there. Whereas the business analyst, that's a numbers guy. Okay, they're the ones that are going to be analyzing the numbers and making sure that before we spend any money in IT, that it's actually going to deliver what it's supposed to deliver, and that the business are going to see a benefit to it. But not just a quality perspective, but a quantifiable benefit.
All right, now, Jo, I have a short follow-up, hopefully really short follow-up here, if I'm right. Okay, do you see like the business relationship manager? To make sure I'm telling you right. Business relationship manager and possibly the head of the IT department. Do you see those two roles as possibly merging, or are they normally separate, or is that a matter of the size of our organization?
Yeah, it's a matter of scale.
Okay.
To be perfectly honest, I would never see the head of IT as being the business relationship manager, because, as I say, the BRM, that's more of a cuddly role. That's more of a building trust. And to be perfectly honest, the head of IT is generally a person who's not seen all that often within the organization. Okay. The BRM is somebody that you run into in the break rooms, in the kitchen areas, and will, have a coffee with you and sort of sit down and listen to your concerns. The head of IT is not generally a role that will do that. So whilst it's not impossible to combine a BRM with a CIO, it's not something that I've ever seen in an organization. So it is down to scale. But like I say, I've never seen that in the real world.
All right, Jo. Well, thank you again for helping us to answer that particular last question as well. And that brings us to the end of another Ask Me Anything, where you have had a chance to, of course, ask those different questions. Please don't feel like if you submitted a question that didn't get answered, it won't be. We do answer them in our Q&A as well as on Twitter. So make sure you follow that as we continue on. But for Jo Peacock and myself, we are signing off for the day. So thank you for joining us right here on Ask Me Anything.